right, so welcome to episode 8 of the Breaking Bio podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Hamblin from the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia. So let's get into it, starting with Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren Reid, a hyper-enthusiastic science goblin based in Glasgow in Scotland.
I'm Morgan. I'm a PhD student at the University of Guelph, and I have not nearly as exciting a title as Lauren.
Hi, I'm Rafael Maya from the University of Akron.
My name is Sam Evans, and I am a lowly master's student, but also from the University of Akron. And I have a hat.
That's going to play real well in the audio version. All right, so I'm kind of excited by this because we had Lauren in on the last episode, but we really didn't get the chance to talk with her much. So I'd like to kind of reintroduce her and let's talk a little bit about the kind of stuff you do, Lauren. So,
okay.
Why don't you give us a little insight into the science goblin mind?
Okay, so I graduated from my undergrad, which was in psychology, in 2009. And then I took a year out in which I moved from the little village I was living in with my parents to the city of Glasgow, which was like a big deal. And I just started working in a call centre, working for helplines, drugs, alcohol and sexual health helplines for 50 hours a week, in which time I spent most of my time looking up science blogs because Facebook and Twitter were blocked by the business. So so I discovered Ed Yong, Psycurious, people like that, while they were still on the science blog network. And that's how I spent most of my time, and it kept me sane. And I decided I wanted to go back to uni and do a master's in evolution and behaviour. So that's what I did my master's in. And while I was writing my dissertation for my master's, I got there was a PhD that was advertised, which was, the title was Social Learning and Science Communication. So I went to the interview and they offered me it, but it was unfunded. So I really had a dilemma of whether to accept it or not. But in the end I did, because I thought it'd be crazy to turn it down, because science communication is what I wanted to go into. But after 9 months, I just couldn't support myself anymore. We couldn't get any funding. So last month, I packed it in and moved back to Glasgow, where I am trying to make some sort of science communication career for myself.
So you chose this as a vehicle to help that along?
Yeah. I was like, podcast, that sounds good. I've got a lot of free time on my hands at the moment.
I just suddenly feel guilty, like we're at risk of destroying your career completely.
Oh, dude, what else would I be doing tonight? Sitting, getting drunk on wine on my own, not talking about science, so...
You're really perpetuating the Scottish stereotype.
It's totally true. But it's 10 o'clock on a Thursday evening, so it's totally acceptable.
All right. So what's your next steps, Lauren? What are you getting into?
Well, there's Glasgow Science Centre, so I'm hoping to get involved with them some way. In the meantime, I'm just sort of enjoying having no responsibility and working in a bar, but the novelty of that will soon wear off, I'm sure. At the moment, I'm just spending a lot of time on Twitter talking about science in my own capacity, like a little loser PhD dropout. But it's fun. I know. Oh.
Sorry, we need a tiny violin sound effect.
That's not what a violin sounds like. Bagpipes.
No. Yeah.
But yeah, no. I'm considering if the science communication thing doesn't work out, I would go back and do a teaching degree and be a psychology teacher. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not entirely sure what I want to do. But science communication is the area I want to go into, of some sort.
So is there any chance that they'll like get some funding and you can go back to the PhD, or are you done
I
with
don't
that?
think so. The PhD was it was quite experimental. It was a combination between Durham University and the Science Centre in Newcastle that they were kind of trying out. And Durham University is it's a really good uni, but quite traditional. And I just don't think they were completely behind the project. I mean, I didn't want I'd never planned to do a PhD. I was the first person in my family to even do a bachelor's degree. So when I went and did a master's, everyone was like, why? And then, so when I said I was going to do a PhD, and it was the funding conditions was that, well, to pay my tuition fees, was that it was part-time, which would be 6 years as opposed to the normal 3 in the UK. So everyone just thought I was mental. And so no one was bothered when I quit or anything. But yeah, I didn't want the doctorate alone enough. It was really just because it would have given me practical sort of research in science communication, which was what I was looking for.
And did you get some of that in the 9 months that you were there?
Yeah. Oh, I had a great time. I went to like 3 conferences, one of which was a National Science Communication Conference, which was in London. The big event, which is like, it wasn't a conference, it was more of like a science self-help group where everyone just kind of ran up to everyone else, was like, oh my god, science is awesome, and then you were like, yeah, it is, and that for like 3 days. So yeah, I did a lot in 9 months. It was fun. I don't regret it, but yeah, it would have been a lot for 6 years to go on living in poverty. So that's me. That's my message, kids. Don't take a PhD unless you've got funding.
Yeah,
that's actually a good message. I mean, I don't know how many people I've seen. I don't know how many people I've seen go to grad school because they just couldn't think of anything better to do. You know.
Yeah, that's not a good idea.
And that's a terrible reason.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck. Morgan puts up his hand.
It wasn't the sole consideration, but it weighed on the mind. I mean, I knew I wanted to work in entomology, and I knew what I wanted to do, and advanced degrees are important for what I wanted to do. So it's not the sole reason, but it wasn't the only reason that I went. There being hardly any funding in jobs for entomologists at this point.
Well, that's kind of the thing.
Sure.
I mean, if you want to do this, if you want to be in grad school and you want to go the full route, you have to want it. Like, you have to be prepared for the fact you're going to get shit pay, long hours. You know, you're basically going for the emotional paycheck. Right? And, you know, people who
kick in the ass.
The people who show up with this romantic idea and don't really care about the science so much, it's a big waste of time and money for them.
Passion first, pay later.
Or never.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. It doesn't get that much better after the PhD.
Which takes us on to the funding cuts issue. I liked.
So in Australia, they recently announced a bunch of funding cuts, and so they cut $500 million from the they call it the Sustainable Research Excellence Fund or something like that. But it's basically the kind of operating money for the universities. So now they've got all these people and all this research going on, but they're not sure how they're going to fund things like keeping the lights on. This just seems emblematic of what's going on everywhere, right? Like, I know Canada's a mess right now. Things aren't great in the U.S. either, if I recall.
Not that well, no. Yeah, I think they're getting a little bit better, but they're still pretty. And so I think things are not a lot better in Europe either. I was hearing the other day that like Spain, like the main funding agency has cut for next year all the funding for young researchers. So that was pretty scary.
So do you mean like support grants for like PhDs and masters?
Not for students, but for young researchers once they're done, I think. That's what I understood from it.
Yeah,
So
early career people.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. There's your diploma and some food stamps.
Yeah.
Jesus.
The early career research awards here, the DECRAs, they have a funding rate of like 12% is the success rate. was going to ask Lauren, do you know the situation in the UK right now? How bad it is? Or?
Yeah, I made some notes on this actually earlier on.
Okay, let's just record that she is the most prepared person ever for this podcast.
Unemployed science communicator.
I don't know how to deal with this level of preparation.
Yeah. This is not how we roll.
I'm the class teacher's pet. I don't know. Well, the UK. I think it was a couple of years ago. There was an organisation set up called the Science is Vital campaign. And their website states that the UK has a proud history of excellence in STEM subjects, producing over 10% of global scientific output with only 1% of global population, and despite spending less on science per capita than their competitors. But despite that, cuts, especially since the last government was elected, the Conservative government, have just been cut and cut and cut. And in 2010, the public science budget was frozen at 4.6 billion, which was described by the government at the time as generous. But when you compare that to other spending in the UK, like 118 billion on health, 114 billion on pensions, 33 billion on education, and 43 billion on defence, 4.6 billion doesn't seem that generous anymore. So.
I'm sorry, I'm just taking a second to be in awe of the fact that she delivered that.
Yeah, that's right.
All right.
Thank
well
you.
played.
I'm so proud and ashamed of myself at the same time.
Total proud right there. There's no reason you were working at a bar at this point.
Now our podcast is actually informative. It's not just us making shit up.
Can I put this podcast on my CV?
Oh yeah, you can. I'm not sure you're going to want
now
to.
Now that you showed up, I am.
But the bottom line is, here's another lesson, kids. We need to invest in science. That's just a fact. And it's sad that all these cuts are happening because they're not thinking forward or sensibly at all.
You know, we really do need some sort of like PSA graphic here.
Yeah.
The more you know. Because we're getting all this great information, like, you know, we need to invest in science, don't order pubic lice off the net. This is
life
stuff
lessons
we need to be calling out, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, Sam, have we freaked you out about the possibilities of you're ever getting a job yet?
Oh, I done been freaked out, man. For a long time. I'm just holding on.
That tenuous grip in life.
Barely.
Dude, we could get a job together.
Yeah. Nope.
Look,
yeah, I too am unemployed. If you want me to go into my spiel, so I'm technically a master's student at Akron, but the actuality of it is I am in Cincinnati, finishing my thesis and applying to PhD programs without any sort of funding coming in. So I'm unemployed too. So I know how it feels, Lauren. And that was because the University of Akron had zero funding for all master's students that had completed their fourth semester this past year, which is, usually you at least have a chance at getting an RA-ship or a summer TA-ship or something to kind of stretch you out, get you to help you finish your thesis. But in my case, I was just kind of given the boot. And so I scrambled. I tried to find a job, ended up becoming a lab tech at Rice University, which only served to delay finishing my thesis further. And now I'm back to square one, unemployed, and trying to finish this thesis and apply to PhD programs. So yes, I'm holding on tenuously to the dream of being an academic.
I'm not sure if this is a podcast or if we should be switching to suicide counseling here.
Yeah, I feel really bad that I don't have beer with me today. It's the appropriate day to be drinking and crying out our sorrows.
No, I didn't want to sound like I was a poor lost soul. It's
mission
something
accomplished.
Yeah, well, damn it! I knew I would do that. I knew I would end up sounding like some poor pathetic
normal grad student.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No,
But that's the crazy part for me. I mean, because getting into a master's and a PhD, like it's something that you can do. You know, if you put some effort, you can get in. Hopefully, with some funding, at least here in the U.S. But like at least here, like there's actually a lot of new programs popping out all the time. Like the program that I'm in, I'm the second cohort, so it was like created, you know, a year before I got here.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you know, it's relatively well funded and everything. But what are you supposed to do with all these people once they actually need jobs? It's just, I know this has been talked a lot, you know, how it's like almost like a pyramid scheme and everything, but it just like, it baffles me.
I can't remember if it was one of you guys or it was somebody I'm following on Twitter, and I don't follow that many people, that posted a blog post or shared a blog post about this idea for making postdocs a permanent, like a career-end position. That I thought was really interesting. I was trying to pull it up, but I can't find it now, of course.
that was
I
a
don't know if any
Nature
of you
essay.
read that. That was who?
It was a Nature essay I read.
Oh.
Yeah, labs would definitely benefit from having, you know, capable researchers that would stay more than a couple years, which is normal for a postdoc, and people would benefit from having jobs other than lab heads, you know.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I've
but
often
it's
thought
cheaper
that,
to keep postdocs, I guess.
Yeah. My question would be, was that article written by a postdoc, or was it written by an already tenured prof that is looking back saying, I don't need any more company, I'm fine with keeping you minions around permanently?
Actually, you would think that, but it was actually written by a postdoc, I think. And there's a movement kind of in postdoc land, if you will.
Secret society of the postdoc?
Yes, we're all the postdoc fairies. Wait, that didn't sound great. But there is actually kind of an undercurrent going around which says, you know, that people don't want to become PIs. They don't want to, you know, have their own labs. They just like doing the science, and they want to stay at that level, right? So there's been this kind of push and, you know, chatter going around saying, why don't we make it a position where, you know, you can join a lab as a professional postdoc, and you add the resources of your learning and training, but you don't have to start your own lab, get your own funding, go through that cycle, you know.
Yeah.
So I don't plan on doing that. Although I have actually heard of people I haven't verified any of these individually, but I've heard of people who were tenure track faculty, and they've actually dumped that and switched back to being a postdoc. Mm-hmm. And the other avenue that people are going on about is, you know, linkage with industry, right? Which of course doesn't do me any good because nobody cares in industry what I do. But
yeah, that's the big pitch here in Akron. Like our PhD program is integrated biosciences, and like there's a bunch of students that got in now through these biomimetic grants, which are actually being funded by private companies. So like all their stipends and everything, their tuition are being paid by a company, and instead of teaching, they work part-time on that company while they're doing their PhD.
So they all drive around in Porsches and
we have a PhD in one of those biomimetic grants at our lab, and she had a meeting with her company people, and she was like, I live kind of far from the university. They're like, okay, we'll get you a car. And, you know, a week later, she had a car. What you said it's not a Porsche, but it's not a bad car either.
Damn.
It's not that far. I mean, so for some areas of biology, I guess, there is company, you know, business interest, I guess. Not bird feathers, that's for sure, but...
Yeah, I don't think anybody's ever going to look at my CV and say, ooh, we want this guy.
So are you doing your first PhD there? Oh, sorry, your first postdoc there in Australia?
No, I'm actually on my 7th PhD, but, you know...
Who's counting?
You know, after the first 5, they all blend together. Yeah, this is my first postdoc. So I'm kind of starting to... It's still a little early, but I'm starting to nose around for the next step, which could be another postdoc. I'm going to apply for, you know, faculty jobs as well, and
And your plan is to go back to Canada, right? Because I remember you posted recently on your blog that you were pretty pissed at something about the Australian system.
Yeah, I'm not thrilled with Australia, but actually Canada isn't going to be our next step. Working in Australia has been great, and the science here is good, and the people are fantastic. Morgan's shaking his head. Yeah, no, there's no point in going back to Canada right now.
Not for the next 3 years, at least.
I'm actually aiming for the UK or somewhere in Europe. But
Hi.
Oh yeah, that's true. You went on your Hambling tour after ISBE, right?
yes, my worldwide tour. It's a shame. It's a shame actually that I didn't know Lauren yet. We could have met up because I was in Sterling, and yeah, I gave a talk at Tom's department. So
I see. Yeah.
that was kind of
people don't
dismissive.
usually go to Stirling.
That's what they all said when I was there. They were all very apologetic about the whole thing. Like
They should be. I lived there for 5 years.
It's sort of like Ohio. Yeah, you come to Ohio and we're all like, why are you here? Quick, get out, before you can't ever leave again. I mean, I tried to, and I'm back in Ohio.
Before it drains your soul.
Sucks me
The
back
only
in.
good thing in Stirling is the Wallace Monument, which is basically a giant penis. Associated with the film Braveheart.
it's true.
Yes.
Wow.
You can see it
So I
from
assume
miles
that's not the
away.
bologna stone, then. You're not kissing that one to get good luck.
It's a long climb.
Did you visit the giant penis while you were there?
No, you could see it from far enough away. I didn't.
What is it, like Mount Rainier sized, or you can just see it from across the stage?
Just
or-
Google the Wallace Monument. It's the most phallic erection I've ever seen.
as opposed to non-phallic erections.
Yeah, in the building sense of the word.
Okay. Sorry.
Are we going to be using archaic word meanings throughout the whole of this podcast? Because if we do, somebody has to use ejaculation. Well, enough of that.
This is the most morbid episode yet, and I like a lot.
So, grad school sucks.
This is gonna take a lot of editing.
No. No, I didn't mean to contribute to the whole grad school sucks idea. It's unlike what we were talking about at the very beginning. I don't even know if it might have been before you hit record, but I did want to go to grad school. And I didn't just go because it was the only thing left to me. It was something that I wanted to do since before I started my undergrad. And yet here I am, and I'm still not in the PhD. So I've been dragging my feet, kind of. But I think having a master's degree actually is really beneficial.
Somebody's right is
Steven.
your...
So like we were talking about earlier, about the disdain for master's students or getting a master's degree in this day and age, how it's more sexy to get a PhD right away. I don't know if any of you can tell stories about your master's programs and if you felt like you made the right choice waiting to do a master's first, because I certainly think I did. I certainly underestimated the bureaucratic side and the political side of academia, and I'm glad I got exposed to that and made all my faux pas and all my mistakes in a 2-year program as opposed to screwing up a PhD. But I don't know if anybody's experiences differ.
I have absolutely no regrets about getting my MSc beforehand. It's not as common in Canada to go directly into a PhD project. Normally you go into an MSc first after your undergrad and then move into a PhD, so it's not as unusual as it is in the States, I think. But I've said this before, I'll say it again, that I wouldn't have been ready for a PhD, or I sure as hell wouldn't have been ready for a postdoc and or applying for real jobs at this point. Definitely no regrets. I wouldn't recommend any other way, really, in my circumstances.
Yeah, I second what Margaret said. Yeah, I definitely agree, and I don't regret at all. But in Brazil, it's the commonplace as well. Like, it's really rare for people to jump straight to the PhD.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost unheard of in the UK to go straight from undergrad into a PhD. I don't know anyone who's ever done that. I've only heard of a couple of instances of it ever happening. So it's just the norm here. If you want to do a PhD, you do a master's. And if you get a funded master's degree, they quite often offer you a 1+3, because a master's degree here is 1 year. Like you were saying, Stephen, there's no fucking about. Master's degree is 1 year, and a PhD is 3. And if you want to extend your PhD, you really need to, kind of beg for it. And the funding stops after 3 years usually. So yeah, like here that's just what you do. You do a master's, and then if you want to do a PhD, you do a PhD. But yeah, it's just there was no question about that for me.
I think, actually, Lauren, that it's good to have you on this podcast, partly because you present the other alternative, right? Because there's this idea that you get into the PhD and you have to finish it, and it's this life-consuming goal, but there's a lot of valid routes to take, not only to be in science, but to an academic career. And I don't know, I think we get a little too focused on this straight line path between undergrad to PhD to faculty member to,
I think that's a lot more of a focus in the States and in other countries. Like in the UK, it's not, I don't know, it just doesn't have the same linear kind of thing to it. I don't know. When I hear people like from America and other places talking about like grad school, it just people's experiences and the timeline and the kind of path that people take seems completely different than my experience over here.
I got through my PhD fairly easily, but I could because I was doing theoretical work, right? All I had to do was just,
Well, you see, I'm doing theoretical work too, and it's I don't have the empirical excuse. I don't have my field season sucked. Well, no, it's more like, my data got corrupted, or I screwed up my code, or my computer crashed, or I had to build a new computer to finish my thesis, which I had to do. I left Akron, and I'm actually a behavioral ecologist as an undergrad who jumped into computational biology head first without any programming experience, and that's why I'm still trying to finish my thesis.
Yeah, well, we have a lot in common then.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a lot in common with Lauren, too, because I have an undergrad in psych, and I worked in a call center after my undergrad degree, waiting for my master's.
Like kindred spirits.
Well, yeah, except I was working for a bank, which,
Oh, you're worse.
Yeah. I would have been calling you for advice on how to start drinking. Like,
dude, I do not need that advice. Yeah.
That was the worst year of my life, truthfully. I was working for TD Bank at their call center. It was just the most soul-sucking experience ever. The things you do to get to grad school. I'm sure we can have reader stories about that, but.
Yeah, so I bet you didn't have people masturbating on the phone to you, though.
Oh my god.
That's honestly what I had to deal with for a year.
That's nasty.
Okay, yeah. I'll admit, they don't often call up and ask about their bank balance while they're whacking off, but...
Yeah, they call up and ask about HIV and chlamydia while they're wanking off.
I've got to ask, how can you tell? What tips you off? Is there like heavy breathing? Is there like do you want me to do it? Do you want me to do it? Yeah. There's no good answer. Sure.
It's kind of like, so they'll phone up and you say, "Hi, you're through to the sexual health line," and they'll go like this. "Hello. Are you still there? I've got a thing down below. I've got a dirty thing." Like that.
All right, so they were pretty upfront about it then.
Oh yeah, no shame.
Did you ever feel the urge to just start charging $2.99 a minute? Like,
yeah, no, it was an 0800 number. It was like a free call. That's what it was. Like, these people obviously couldn't afford broadband. Do you know what I mean?
I just can't imagine calling up for information about HIV and getting off on that. Like,
I don't think they wanted the information. They just, I think some people are just really turned on by like human beings like speaking to them. They're obviously very isolated.
That's a pretty low bar they got there.
I've got a very nice voice on the phone, I'll have you know.
Well, there's one alternate career path for you. I mean, if
I'm not going
the
back
whole
there.
science,
Oh.
the whole no, just sex line operator.
Yeah, maybe. Now that I've got my cool new headset, I could totally do that. Yeah.
I'm just trying to imagine what other kind of things that these people call and do the same thing to. You know, like who knows?
Oh, I could honestly talk to you for hours about the kind of calls I had. I had like when on the drugs line, women, like mothers, would phone up and demanding to know what this tablet was that they'd found in their daughter's room, thinking it was like ecstasy, and it was like the contraceptive pill and stuff like that. It was ridiculous.
That must have led to some tricky ethical situations for you.
Well, not really, because we just basically couldn't. Well, we can't identify it, but afterwards they'd be like, "Yeah, that was definitely the pill." So, wait, is it, the key words are sorry. That's it with our remit.
That was very practiced.
Totally.
You sound like you had fun. All I got was people calling up drunk at 3 a.m. demanding to know where all their money was.
I got that too sometimes. Yeah, on the drink line.
Fair enough.
You just hit the entire sweepstakes of crazy people.
It gave me such good material though for comedic purposes.
I mean, just a book waiting to happen, basically.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Science communication of call lines. Jesus.
You should set up a call center for science communication.
I know.
I want royalties for that idea,
Science
by the
line.
way.
Did you ever get those people who were, they'd call you, like we got this all the time, people who would call just because they were bored or they were old and lonely.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it's, you know, you get a 70-year-old woman who just calls every night to check on her bank balance because she just has nobody else to talk to. Did you get a lot of that?
Loads of that, yeah. I got a lot of drunk people phoning up, and then halfway they'd be spilling their heart to me, you know, telling me about their life, and you know, I'm reading science blogs in the background, and then and suddenly they'll turn and be like, "Who are you?" I'm like, "Sorry." They're like, "Why did you phone me?" I'm like, "Bitch, you phoned me." Like, you think you've built a relationship with this person on the other side of the phone, and then they just turn all crazy, and it was emotionally difficult.
It must have been while you were reading your science blogs.
Yeah, I was like, dude, I'm trying to read about duck penises here, like breaking news, 2009.
So did you ever get these mixed up? Were you like reading science blogs on dog penises while responding to a sexual health client, being like, well, it says here that
You need to corkscrew.
doing is...
I don't think that ever happened. I don't think
that's
so. It would have been awesome if it did, though. Would have been hilarious, yeah.
You were clearly too good at your job then.
Oh, man, multitasking is my forte.
I just imagine she was, you know, reading an article about barnacles and got things horribly wrong.
Oh, the barnacle's penis, one of my favourites.
I'm gonna let that one go.
Well done.
Well, so I think we beat grad school into the ground, but you know, there was one thing I wanted to get your guys' opinion on for this week. Breaking news, as it were, the conviction of Italian scientists.
No.
Wanted to hear what you guys had to say about this. So, if you're not familiar with the story, you know, perhaps you're listening to this and you haven't heard of it. 6 Italian scientists were recently convicted. Was the government official convicted too?
Yeah, one government official.
And so
6 scientists.
they got 6 years in prison, I believe, because they gave what was characterized as misleading statements in regards to a earthquake that happened in 2009. There was a series of microshocks, and they said correctly that, you know, we can't take this as predictive of a larger quake, and a larger quake hit, and, you know, people died, and so they were brought up on charges and recently convicted. And so this is understandably sparked outrage across the world. But I want to hear if you guys have any thoughts on this.
Other than crazy?
Yeah, other than terrifying? Yeah. You know?
Well, it seems to link in with this kind of sweeping phenomenon I'm seeing across the globe, unless I'm just making it up, but it seems like there's this tide of anti-intellectualism, right? Where, you know, you see this especially like in the U.S. current election campaign. You know, the Republican Party has almost become the anti-science party, right? And you know, I just feel like I'm seeing more of this. You know, anti-vaccination groups, you know, denigrating scientists, and you know, people saying, you know, we don't want to teach that evolution in our schools. You know, down with the experts.
Evolution and climate change are lies straight from hell.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who is that guy?
Member of, I forgot his name, but he's on the House. He's a representative in the Committee for Science Advancement or something like that.
Yes, that's fantastic. What
Yeah,
do you think, Lauren? I mean, we have to find ways to communicate science, right?
Exactly.
To kind of get around this. But do you have any thoughts on how we solve a problem like this?
No, I mean, what the scientists what their job is to offer scientific advice to the best of their ability, and that's exactly what they did. A big problem with this story is that a lot of articles are saying that they're convicted because of the science, and it's not a scientific issue, it's a communication issue. And I read an article, I think it was the New Scientist article on this, that actually put a spin on it as positive as can be spin on the story, by saying that this should allow scientists to step up and not rely on people to communicate their science for them. You know, so-called experts in communication. If they know what they're talking about, and they totally believe in what they know, then they should be responsible for communicating that forward. I don't know how I feel about that article, actually, because I don't think that all scientists should be forced to communicate or engage with the public in that way if they're not comfortable with that. But yeah, it's scary, because who's going to want to now communicate science, but particularly to do with earthquakes in Italy, Europe, you know? Who's going to stand up and do that now? It's just going to be a big scaremonger.
Yeah.
It just, and I haven't read, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Seth. Go ahead.
Yeah, I haven't read into this too much, but it sounds to me like, there's this growing expectation that, we're scientists, therefore we can predict anything. We can tell you what the weather's going to be like for the next 2 years, and if meteorologists can't predict what the weather's going to be like next week, then they suck. Well, things like meteorology and especially earthquakes are inherently unpredictable. Even more so than most scientific phenomena. And so this is extremely baffling to me, that anyone would be expected to provide correct information on whether a major earthquake will or will not happen in the near future. It seems like, to me, like the most obvious, obviously unpredictable phenomenon, and yet people are going to prison for getting it wrong.
Yeah.
Well, it's not even getting it wrong. It's people misunderstanding what they were saying.
Yeah. But also the belief that a scientist should know everything. The whole point is that scientists, they need to be able to share what they know, but also admit what they don't know. Mm-hmm. And it's like this anti-intellectual thing. People are now sitting there rubbing their hands like, oh yeah, scientists have been proved wrong, those evil scientists, look what they've done. And it's like, well, no one said we ever knew everything, No one ever claimed that.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest misunderstanding. I'm not even a scientist.
I know.
That's what I always tried to. That's what I always tried to teach my intro bio students when I was teaching at Akron. Is scientists are very often wrong, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, it's hard to explain to people that when we get to say, "Oh, I was wrong about that," or "Gee, I don't know," or didn't expect that. Those are the most exciting moments in science.
Yeah.
That means we have something to do, right?
And it goes to an interesting aspect of science literacy, because every time you hear about science literacy, like I think it was in the New Scientist article, they were saying like something like 43% of Americans that were interviewed couldn't recognize like the picture of a spiraling galaxy or something like that, and they were using that as evidence of lack of scientific literacy. But knowing facts is one part of scientific literacy and scientific communication. But a more important one, I think, is for people to understand like what science is, what the scientific process is, and how to apply critical thinking to even really basic things in their lives. So I think this case of the earthquake scientists in Italy, it's an example of people not understanding what the role of a scientist is and how science works as Sam and Steve, you were talking. So like that's why I think some science communicators are so good, because they report not only on what people found, but on kind of how the thing works. Like when you read like one of Ed Young's articles or one of Carl Zimmer's articles, he really goes into like how that knowledge came to be, which is like a really interesting thing, I think. So one problem is that people don't know a lot of stuff about the natural world and don't understand very basic concepts. But another thing is that they don't understand what makes science different from other ways of getting knowledge, and why it is important to understand that and apply that to their lives.
I was reading somebody's post the other day, and just talking about people need to understand that it's not a philosophy. Science is a methodology. It's not a belief system. It's a method of acquiring knowledge. And I don't know how we put that in layman's terms, but I feel like that's kind of the root of what we should be trying to communicate. To people.
I'm curious about this idea of scientific literacy. Like, I'm torn on it. I don't know which way to jump on this, because the idea that we can just shovel facts into people's heads and they'll become scientifically literate is problematic. But the idea of just it's only about how you think doesn't work either, right? You still need information. You still need to know what the facts are before you can think critically about them. And I don't know if we can get people to the level where they're going to understand a lot of this stuff. Understanding, why evolution is true. I've spent most of my adult life learning about evolution, and I still know only a tiny part of it, right? A little sub-corner of a sub-corner of a subfield where I know a little bit about. How do you expect people in the street to deal with that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the only way that I've been able to really explain it is you've got probably a max of 10 years to instill a good, not fear of science, but a good understanding of science and with the scientific method for people when they're in elementary and high school. And that 10 years is not even guaranteed to be, good scientific inquiry. I'm not saying that scientific teachers or science teachers are bad or whatever. I'm just saying that for the vast majority of the population, they may not be exposed to the right method of science communication, science teaching that would work best for them throughout that time. So that's where they get frustrated sometimes and back down and say science is hard, math is hard, I don't do that anymore. Mm-hmm. And so you have this very, very small window in which to impress such important ideas. And once they're past that, there's nothing you can do to force them to learn it. Once they graduate, whatever their science credit is that they needed in high school, you can't force them to take any more mandatory. And so you've got 10 years teaching them along with everything else, and then they've got a lifetime to forget what it is why it's important. And
sorry,
no, go ahead.
I was just going to wonder, what's our actual goal here, right?
Yeah.
What would we count as success? Is it if everybody can answer a test on basic science facts correctly, or is it, what's our criteria?
No, I would say that it's not, saying answering Jeopardy style science facts. I think it's an appreciation for what science is, an actual appreciation for what it is. Like like Sam said, it's not a belief. It's a methodology that can be applied in everyday life, whether you are an employed scientist or whether you are, of whatever else you do for a living. You use the same principles in your day-to-day life on the smallest of details, just making them see that what they do day to day, or giving the tools to see what they do every day, is the same thing as these bigger, broader issues are, and to approach them with the same mindset of being open to data and not just being open to ideals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think once we get across the message that being a scientist doesn't make you better than someone else, people will stop having that reactionary, anti-intellectual defense mechanism to science and scientific findings.
You really got to wonder how good of a job we're doing at that. So
probably not very good. Yeah, unfortunately.
Well, obviously,
because let's be honest, some scientists are in it to feel intellectually elitist. Let's be honest. I mean, we've all met people like that at meetings. I'm
Scientists
sure
are people.
Yeah. It's not like we're completely innocent ourselves. Let's be honest. Everyone in this podcast likes to be called a scientist. We feel special to a degree, and maybe that's part of the problem. I mean, it's okay to like being a scientist, but you have to present yourself in a way that doesn't come across as elitist to someone else. And that's easier said than done.
Well, I go with scientist because male model didn't work out for me.
Are you kidding? Oh.
Yeah, so that goes back to what we were talking a little bit about, the role of scientists and science communication. And to me, that only highlights how important it is to have people that are actually good and dedicated to communicating science, even if they're not actively doing it. Because, like, the truth is, most of us suck at it. Like, we're really, really bad and awkward. Like, it's like the stereotype of a scientist,
Mm-hmm.
And
that's that fight I had with Christy Wilcox, right? This idea that you give every scientist a blog or a Twitter account, and all of a sudden science communication is solved, right? And I don't think that's true. I think we need people like Lauren, and I think we need people like Ed Yong, Carl Zimmer, and people who are good at communicating science and understand science and care about it, but who can bridge that gap for us, who can help us, as scientists, and help communicate the science. Like, we need people like that focused on it. And I don't know. So, Lauren,
and I think there should be more jobs for people like that.
Yeah.
Paid ones.
Yeah.
I agree with Lauren.
And also to just communicate, that scientists are people, and they're not just this ethereal, up on a pedestal profession.
Yeah, that is an underappreciated fact, that we are basically people. We can be petty, we can be kind, we can be frauds.
Yeah.
Like, people got all excited and upset that there's been fraud in science, right? Like, how could this have happened? It's because they're human beings, right? And science isn't about the people; it's about the process.
Yeah, and people put too much trust in the self-policing aspect of science, which, through many reasons, like the fact that no one values replicating studies and all that, is becoming thinner and thinner. So,
yeah,
we suck at it, and people are going to try to take advantage of it, and we don't put the right values in place. And I'm probably rambling, but yeah.
We're getting close to Rafael's. Sorry, I was going to say we're getting very close to Rafael's soapbox on open access, which is very appropriate. I think. Yeah, and I agree.
Well, not only open access, but just the ways that we value
transparency in science.
Good science, what we call good science.
Anyways, this is a really, really, really big tangent to the science literacy that we started on.
Yeah. Please take us off from here.
Well, welcome to the podcast. I mean,
yeah, I know.
I don't think we've ever moved in a straight line since day one.
No, it's fine. That's where the best ideas come from, is these circuitous insults. But
how far did you get on your notes, Lauren?
I only wrote notes on the Italian conviction and the science funding, actually. So we've covered everything. So I'm pretty happy with it.
Wow. Yeah. Did we miss any important facts that you need to get out to the public here?
Oh no, I got them all in.
It's kind of impressive, actually.
Sneaky.
Science communicator. That's what she's there for.
There you go.
Yeah.
Remember that part about some people being good at it and others not so much? So there you
Yeah.
go.
If I've gone
Yeah, I
to the
think so.
bother of writing it down, yous are hearing it, whether you like it or not.
We got a lot covered today. Solved the world's problems in just over an hour.
You did.
Yeah.
All of the
Our
world's
work here
problems.
is done, gentlemen, for this week.
Next week, cancer. You guys have to write grants on that anyways, right? When you're applying for funding, you have to tell how your research on bird coloration is going to solve cancer.
Yeah, see, there's
Use
money in
nanotechnology.
cancer. There's no money in psychom.
Until you get the big cancer announcement, and then somebody has to tell everybody about it. So it trickles down. That's how this works. You guys,
From a
joke,
big break.
you guys joke about the whole tying your work to cancer to do anything, but with taxonomy, and especially with insect taxonomy, it's actually kind of one of the easier claims. Like we do the whole what's that Sean Connery movie in the rainforest, The Rain Man? No, that was Dustin Hoffman.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about, but
Yeah, anyways, where he's
Wrong time.
the cancer researcher, and he goes and picks up ants that nobody's ever seen and gets the cancer cure out of it. It's not that comes up a lot in insect systematics for making a reason. I don't agree with it. I think it should be done just for its own sake. But a lot of taxonomists will use that as a reason, saying who knows what these insects or other things, other organisms that we don't know about, how they could be used by us for any number of medical reasons. And Stephen has reminded me it was medicine man, not rain man. So there you go.
see, how ridiculous does that get, though? I mean, do you start claiming you're going to, I don't know, regrow limbs using ants you find in the Amazon?
Well, there's a lot of, what was it the other day? There was Ed Young, who seems to be the focus of this entire episode. He posted a story on some really interesting but very disturbing research about a mouse that sheds its skin to predators. So you can just rip the skin off this mouse really, really easily. And so those researchers were saying this is a heck of a lot better organism to be studying for regenerative medicine rather than salamanders that are regrowing toes or mice tails or stuff like that. And so it is, in some regards, it is a pretty valid argument, finding better model organisms in some regards for certain questions. You always hear about, plants and stuff that have some healing capacity, or black mamba's venom that is now supposedly some sort of pain reliever in some ways. So, yeah, there are, the occasional hit in this kind of things, but most of the time it's a pretty big miss.
Yeah, I think it's a slippery slope, to use the overused term, but including these more and more outrageous excuses to what we want to do to get funding. But then there's also the sad, you need to remember, especially when you're writing a grant or something like that the people you're competing with are going to be doing that. So
you're saying it's a race to the bottom.
It's a race to the bottom.
And you got to wonder, okay, well, who's reading these grants? Are they just rolling their eyes every time they see, oh, yeah, another one that links their study to global warming or something, or climate change, or cancer, things like that. Yeah. And I was like, is it really are they really looking for the first person whose study doesn't make that connection? They just put them at the bottom of the pile? Is that really what's going on? Or are we just kind of fooling ourselves and thinking that we have to? Yeah.
We don't really know how this goes right now.
Look, I've talked to people on grant committees, and it's pretty clear that they're just fucking throwing these things down the stairs anyways. And seeing which one lands first.
The whole broader impact section of NSF grants and stuff. I don't have that much experience writing grants, but it just seems like it's the most political part of the entire funding process. You just have all these platitudes that you're just throwing out there. And it's like, is there any meaningful context that actually goes into a broader impacts statement, or is it just like what sounds the best, what sounds the sexiest?
Well, grant writing is a really perverse thing to do anyways, right? you end up writing about science that you hope will get funded, so that you can theoretically go do it. But half the time you've already done the science, and you're actually just trying to justify what you've already done, pretending that you haven't done it yet. You know, like
Yeah.
Fund the next project down the road with money for the one you've already done.
yeah. I think XKCD did something on this, didn't they?
It sounds very familiar, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, the broader impacts part also includes aspects of outreach and stuff like that. It's not just application. So I think it's kind of cool that they added that there and they started weighing it quite heavily, well, relatively heavily, to at least get people worried about this kind of stuff.
All right. Well, it's been about an hour and 20 minutes now. Should we call this a wrap for the day and let everybody go back to
Bed.
whatever they're doing?
I think we should finish with another Lauren impersonation of inappropriate call.
Do you want me to say
on
bye
her
later?
hotline.
Wow.
Weird caller number 2.
Yeah, we could end on you doing a this was Breaking Bio in your super
Yeah.
breathy voice. I guess we should actually mention before we go though that we're actually all legit now. We have social media presence and websites and everything. You can contact us on Twitter at Breaking Bio, and we have a breakingbio.com is live, where you can find all the old episodes archived. And
we'll
you
probably
can
add the
email
links to
us.
the stories we should talk about there. Sorry
Yeah.
for monologue.
Yeah, no, we'll put the stories up there as well, so you can follow along there. And you can email us at breakingbio@gmail.com if you want to suggest anything or give us feedback or otherwise be involved. And I see you lost the hat halfway through.
It was getting hot. I needed to take it off. It was getting a little hot and heavy.
It was mid-rant.
After Lauren's stories, I had to, kind of cool off a bit.
Yeah.
It's getting a little too red in the face. And I'm not even the one drinking wine. So.
Yeah, I think Morgan wins for red in the face here.
I'm blaming that on this crazy hot halogen lamp and that I'm a fucking ginger, so yeah.
Because you are pretty much Nova at this point. What the hell?
I'm actually not. I'm more natural in
He's
real life.
actually in a
but
tanning booth right now. He's just got a half of a tanning bed hanging over
This
his
is how I
head.
multitask. Pretty much is. Giant halogen light that I'm using here.
See, that's why mine is pointed away, backlighting. It's all backlighting. It's all
So what you're saying is we need a closed sound set, makeup and hair and lighting now?
Pretty much. Pretty much. That 60 cents you made from Rob last week is going to go a long ways towards.
Yeah, we gotta stretch that.
Well, I think he sent it to Lauren, didn't he?
Yeah, this is how I got this.
Oh, that's investment.
Ah.
That's worth it first. I'll look like a beat so that Lauren can hang in.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
Oh, all right. So that was episode 8 of the Breaking Bio podcast. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Nice talking to you guys.
See ya.